Colleagues, move back to item number 13, a report by Mr Blair in place of Mr Fairley.
Thanks, Provost. In the absence of the Council, Section 95, Officer and 10 cover the next 5 reports, supported by my colleague Mr Gary Thompson, who's sitting on my left-hand side. This third quarter revenue monitoring report indicates that the Council are projecting a net underspend in the current year of approximately 1.43 million. The most significant movements are as listed in Section 2.1. And Council's asked to note, following the last meeting, a supplementary estimate of £25,000 is being requested to progress the City deal as outlined in the Chief Exec's report to December Council. Table 2.5 outlines the General Fund reserves, with further details being provided in the detailed appendices of today's paper. Colleague directors and my heads of service, as well as Mr Thompson, can provide any clarifications which members may wish to seek. And today, Provost and Council, you are asked to consider the recommendations as detailed in Section 4 on page 63 of today's papers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Blair. Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Provost. Yeah, the report's fairly self-explanatory. Obviously, members may or may not have questions in individual detail, but yeah, we did agree in December the proposals around the City deal. I think it's useful to see that included in here, and otherwise move the recommendations.
Questions or comments? No. Okay. Move on. Thank you.
Thanks again, Provost. The second finance report provides Council with details of the housing revenue financial performance for the current year 2014-15. Firstly, the Housing Revenue Account Capital Plan provides for £81.128 million of investment in the period to 2017-18, and the projected outturn for 2014-15 is set out in Appendix 2 of today's papers. Appendix 3 on page 84 indicates that the Housing Revenue Account is projected to show an underspend of approximately £500,000, which is a direct consequence of the investment in refurbishment works. Again, Council is asked to note the contents of today's paper.
Councillor Thompson.
Likewise, again, the report essentially takes care of itself. I think we've continued to invest in our housing stock, and other than that, simply move the recommendations in the report.
Questions or comments? Okay. Item number 15.
Thanks again, Provost. This report seeks Council agreement to the Treasury Management and Annual Investment Strategies for 2015-16. In line with SITFA governance, Council is required to approve in advance a Treasury Management Strategy for the financial year 15-16. The key features of the strategy are the Council's capital financing requirements, which reflect the Council's capital programmes, the borrowing strategy and the Council's investment strategy. Section 2.2 of today's paper provides the prudential indicator requirements. Council should also note that the Audit Committee 2 weeks ago today considered this report at its meeting on the 3rd of February. As stated earlier, my colleague Gary Thompson is in the chambers today, and he is available to clarify any points which members may have with regard to this technical and financial report. Again, Provost and Council, you are invited to consider and approve the recommendations as set out in pages 89 of today's papers. Thank you.
Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Provost. Yeah, again, as was mentioned, the Audit Committee did have a chance to consider this report. Rather than sort of removing recommendations, I think it might be useful. I mean, obviously we've got an extended list of permitted investments this year. Perhaps, if you wouldn't mind just giving us a wee bit more detail around that. We did have a brief discussion audit, but it may be useful for Council to understand why.
Sure. Thanks for your question. In terms of the list of permitted investments, you're quite right. That's been expanded to include both the certificate of deposit and the subordinated debt subscription for the new Battle Centre, both of which were approved by Council in September last year. In addition, a number of new investment types have been included in the strategy in order to give us as much flexibility as possible in the current economic climate, should those investments offer value to the Council's overall investment portfolio. But as always with new investments, we'll carry out a thorough appraisal in advance of placing any new investment in conjunction with our Treasury Management Advisors, Capita.
Councillor Thompson.
Thanks for that. I think, yeah, I mean, as I said, simply move the recommendations. But again, it's probably worth noting that we still achieve amongst the best rates in the country on the borrowing we have. So we're very much doing it as cheaply as we possibly can.
Questions, comments? Okay, move on to item number 16. And once again, Mr Blair.
Thanks, Provost. This monitoring report outlines the financial performance of the Council's General Services Capital Plan. The capital budget is £17.192 million, with the main variations being listed in the main body of the report in sections 2.1 and 2.2. The summary position and projected performance is detailed in the table in section 2.5, and once again, Council is invited to note the Q3 monitoring position of the General Services Capital Plan.
Councillor Thompson. Thanks, Provost. Yeah, again, it's no real surprises in this report, I don't think, to anyone, and simply move the recommendations.
Questions or comments? Okay, thank you. Move to item number 17, the financial strategy. Again, a report by Mr Blair.
Thanks, Provost. This report sets out the final 2015-16 revenue budget, which the Council has been asked to formally approve today. With your indulgence, Provost and Councillors, I will take the Council through the report and focus on the main issues as set out in the Section 95 Officer's Report. The Scottish Government grant was approved in the Scottish Parliament on the 5th of February, and Midlothian Council will receive just under £155 million, which is an improved grant compared to the December Council report. The key issue as set out in the main body of the report is the maintenance of teacher numbers with the pupil-teacher ratio of 14.2 remaining. The position regarding teacher numbers is set out in the appendix, which is in essence a letter from the Deputy First Minister and Cabinet Secretary, and the requirement of that letter is that Council leaders write to the Deputy First Minister by the 20th of February. Section 4 assumes the continuation of the Council tax freeze. The tables on page 158 and 159 set out the budgeted shortfalls, which are anticipated to rise to £16.6 million in 2017-18. Section 6 restates the financial strategy which my colleague Mr Fairley advised the Council of at the December meeting, and Table 5 details the projections going forward, and the Council should again note the extent of the financial challenge facing not only Midlothian Council but other authorities going forward. Within any financial plan, there are a number of assumptions which impact on the cost base of the Council finances. Therefore, Provost and Council, I require to advise you formally of the key risks which are set out on page 164 of today's papers. Firstly, the economic climate, pay awards, government grant levels, unforeseen events, most likely Midlothian weather, cost pressures rising above the estimates already provided, non-delivery or delays in delivering planned savings, the impact of welfare reform and pension changes, the costs of national policies, and the revenue costs associated with any capital investments the Council may wish to consider. Provost and Council, with these comments, Council is invited to consider the recommendations which are detailed on page 165 and 166 of today's papers.
Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Provost. Yeah, I think what we can clearly see here is continued progress towards achieving the targets that we must achieve. It wasn't that long ago that the projection shortfall for 2017-18 was in excess of 17 million. It now sits at just over 16.5 million. That is still a significant challenge that we as a council must address, and that's why the actions that we've taken through the budget this year are taking the steps forward and are making significant progress to addressing this, to the point where now we are projecting that 16.6 million deficit down to 4.9 by 2017-18. I think sometimes it's easy for some to look at the budget in isolation from one year to the next, But when you're looking at the scale of the challenge that we face, that is something that absolutely should not be done, and you have to look at it in the whole. I think we've rehearsed the arguments around the budget a number of times, but I do want to pick up on the issue on teacher numbers. Clearly that has been an item of quite some debate over the last number of weeks, and I think certainly on the second page of the report, page 156 of the agenda, there is the motion essentially that was agreed by COSLA leaders the special meeting on the 6th of February. That's a motion I did not support or agree. Essentially we were in a position where, having asked the Scottish Government to provide additional funding to support the maintenance of teacher numbers, I think the initial offer was 8 million, COSLA asked for 10 million, COSLA were then offered and given 10 million. The position I supported was to accept that offer and that we as a council would seek to maintain our teacher numbers, and that's certainly something that we are looking to do. So certainly in the recommendations, and it being asked to, with Council's approval, write to Deputy First Minister to confirm our commitment to maintain teacher numbers, that is something I warmly welcome. It's unfortunate that the actions of some councils have meant that there is this current standoff between COSLA and the Scottish Government. It does slightly baffle me, because you have a situation for a number of years now where, in agreeing to the grant settlement that we receive as a council, there has been a commitment in there for each council to maintain teacher numbers. Now, as a council in Midlothian, we have done this. But when you look at the situation, for example, Glasgow, who over a number of years have cut 800 teachers out of their establishment. So we now have a situation where they've been happy to take the money, but they've not maintained their teacher numbers, and as a result of that, we're left in a situation where the government are taking sanctions, or possibly taking sanctions against some councils. I personally think that that's entirely appropriate, because while some of us have taken the steps that we need to ensure that we maintain teacher numbers, others have been quite happy to take the money and run. So, in that sense, Provost, I'm delighted to move the recommendations in this report. I think we're in a strong position in meeting the commitments that we've agreed to. We have no problem in keeping the promises that we make. Unfortunately, some others around the country seem to do so. So with that, I'll move the recommendations in the report.
Questions or comments? Councillor Muirhead.
Yeah, well, we're not here to debate the actions of the other councils. We're here to deal with Midlothian Council's budget. And I accept what Owen's saying, that it's not just about this year, it's about going forward. However, in our budget debate last month, we argued as a group that the cuts that were being proposed were not required at that particular. Some of the cuts that were proposed were not required at that time. Things like cuts to the taxi card scheme, the increases in charges for the alarms, the cuts made to the grants to the voluntary organisations, while no part of the budget, nevertheless, are contributing towards the considerable surplus that the council will have in the coming year. We felt at that time that it would be important, particularly with respect to the voluntary organisations, to be able to give them that breathing space with the warning that there could be cuts coming. And we did offer genuinely, although I was a bit disappointed in your reaction to it, because it seemed to me to be a bit flippant, genuinely making the offer to become involved in the committee looking at trying to reduce the budget by other means. I note today that you made another offer for us to come onto the Safer Communities scheme. I take it that was made in the same sort of manner as the one you made to join the budget review group, because it obviously was more important to you to have that as something to knock us with than actually being prepared to accept us participating in it. So we're sitting here with a considerable increase in the surplus that we have at our disposal in the coming year. Therefore, we take the view that we need to go back to look at these issues again, particularly the cuts that are made in the short term, because that level of reserves very much so at the high end of what is recommended that we need to keep in place, we think could be used to alleviate some of the problems that the likes of the voluntary sector that we've made cuts to have in the short term. And the reality is that, you know, we should, yeah, our reserves shouldn't be standing at more than what is considered to be a prudent level. I think we need to revisit the cuts that we made again, given that we've got the opportunity to do so here in terms of ratifying the budget for the coming year.
Councillor Thompson.
I'm moving that we do so.
Then I would wish to second that. I know what you're going to say, but I'm just going to.
Sorry to cut across you, Russell. On a point of order, obviously, given that we only took a decision on these items 2 months ago almost now, I would suggest that that falls foul of the 6-month rule, and as such is not a competent motion.
Okay.
Yeah.
That would certainly be my initial interpretation. If Councillor Muirhead wants to address the Chair regarding that, I'll happily take his comments on board in a final decision. But the position, if Labour wish to continue this, they would need to require to suspend standing orders.
The difficulty we have, and I understand because I thought that that's what the move would be, but the difficulty we have is when we debated in December, we had information in front of us, and the financial side of that was put to us. Now, clearly, this is an updated report which actually gives different figures and a different skew to it, and that's why Councillor Muirhead and myself thought it was appropriate that we should be allowed to have that further debate today. But at the end of the day, if that's the ruling, then so be it. But in the interest of trying to do a budget, and one wonders actually, dare I say, by doing it in December, if we're actually, and we did it as well before anybody says anything, if that's the right and proper time to do it. It used to be a time where 32 local authorities across Scotland actually took their budget decisions on the same day. Now, there's been a move away from that, understand that, but the majority of councils still do that as late as they possibly can, coming up to the date when they have to make these decisions. Now, the papers that are laid in front of us today, and the Acting Chief Executive has just alluded to the figures that are in there, puts a different perspective on what we actually discussed, voted on in December. And I was just, I just put it to you that, and it's up to the monitoring officer at the end of the day, but I just put it to you that in actual fact there is new evidence or new information in front of us that allows us to further open that particular debate.
Councillor Muirhead.
Yeah, just in response to the monitoring officer, we're being asked today to approve the 2015-16 budget. If we're saying we can't discuss it, we can't change anything, what's the point in having the item C on page 165 that asks us to approve the 2015-16 budget as summarised in Appendix 2?
Councillor Thompson.
I would argue that given there was a series of savings proposals that were agreed in December, if new proposals were to be submitted today, I expect that would not fall foul of the 6-month rule. However, what's been asked for, from my understanding, was to revisit those that we had simply agreed in December. If it was a new proposal that was being brought forward, Alan maybe have a different interpretation, but in my mind, a new proposal would in fact not fall foul of the 6-month rule.
Mr Turpie, would you like to interpret that?
It's not so much the question of the proposal, Chair, it's whether there's information which was not previously available. So information that wasn't available in December, which is now available today, that would allow the Council to consider the motion.
Chair, sorry, and the information that's available is the further increase in the surplus that's available. That's different information.
What was the level of surplus and the estimates that were included in the papers throughout the year changed, I think, through every council meeting we had. So to see a change actually coming forward again isn't a major difference, and actually it doesn't materially change the overall position. We still have a situation of addressing a £16.6 million shortfall and over the next 3 years. So if we've got extra money coming in, sure, that's fantastic, but it simply is a minor tweak in the overall scheme of that. We agreed a series of savings proposals in December, and I would argue that to revisit that is a breach of the 6-month rule.
Maybe just to help Councillor, the December decision was to agree to receive a service-by-service budget statement reflecting the grant settlement and agree the final 2015-16 budget on the 10th of February 2015. It's actually the 17th of February because of the delay in councils. So essentially, we undertook to come forward with updated information at this council meeting. So I think very much we're in the hands of the monitoring officer, but I can see both sides of the argument, but we'll defer to Mr Turpie.
I'm very grateful to Mr Blair for his clarifying decision in December, and I think that would mean that coupled with the change with the settlement letter, I can see no reason why the motion cannot be allowed.
Well, I've made the motion that we revisit the cuts that were agreed, certainly the short-term ones, and that would be the proposals that were put to remove the charging for in-house day service provision, £30,000, scrap the telecare charges at £174,000, remove the closing of the taxi card scheme, £4,000.
Do you have a seconder for that? Councillor Emery, thank you.
Just a supplementary, I think in these days of the Borders rail line coming on stream, those people that are actually in receipt of a taxi card scheme also can qualify for getting on the train. Now, I know it's within Midlothian, and it will be within Midlothian, and people have got the wrong end of the stick, thinking you get from one end of the route to the other. But however, within Midlothian, they would qualify for that. Now, what we're doing is we're cutting off those that would come onto the scheme this year, that opportunity in equality terms and in fairness terms to do so. So I just add that to the discussion and debate that we had the last time.
Chair.
Councillor Muirhead.
Chair, I omitted to actually add the grants to voluntary organisations to the statement I just made. With your permission, I'd like to add that.
Councillor Thompson.
Well, I mean, I'll stand by it's highly irregular to be considering a motion twice in 2 council meetings, but notwithstanding it, we've been told it's acceptable. That doesn't change the position. We still have a £16.6 million shortfall. We have, yet again, the only proposal coming forward from the opposition is to spend more money. There is nothing about how do we address the shortfall. I mean, Councillor Muirhead says that we're using the invitations to participate in an unusual way. If that was the case, why would we keep the vacancies open if we didn't genuinely want the participation? We would simply either fill them or remove them. These are genuine offers. There continues to be a genuine offer. It's a standing offer to participate in the Business Transformation Steering Group. It's a standing offer to participate and take part in the Safer Communities Board. These are vacancies. They're appointed to the Labour group. They have not been filled. They have not been removed. They are there and awaiting participation. So to suggest that in any way that's not a genuine offer is really quite strange. As I say, the proposal again from the Labour group is to spend more. We have nothing about how we address the shortfall. The administration group worked forward a series of proposals over a number of months, most of last year, In fact, working forward towards the point, the timetable for the budget was outlined in numerous reports to Council over the year, which said that the savings proposals would be decided at the December Council meeting. That was no surprise. It shouldn't have been a surprise. It's not our fault if the Labour Group only produced their savings proposals over lunchtime in advance of that meeting. So perhaps they've had a bit more time to think about it in advance of today, and that might be why they're trying to have another go at it. But it does not change the fact that it's only by taking the actions we've been able to take so far that we're actually smoothing out the impact of the cuts that are being imposed on us. I mean, we know that the Tory government are continuing to make cuts. We know the Labour, if they were able to form the next government, would continue to make the cuts. So you're exactly right, Councillor Emery. The Scottish Government are getting the cuts as well, and we are getting a share of that. But they have a fixed budget as things stand, and we have to apply what we can. And in protecting local government's share of that budget, I think we've been very fortunate in not meeting some of the challenges that our colleagues south of the border have had to face. So I think it's very naive to suggest that we should take out some of the proposals that we've made so far. I think it's remarkably short-sighted to not recognise the challenge that we face. And it's almost incredible to think that we wouldn't want to ease as much as possible the impact of these cuts in the years ahead, which is exactly what we've been doing. Having a surplus for this current year doesn't mean that there's suddenly a whole pile of extra money in the bank. That's being used to offset the future cuts that we might otherwise have had to take. And we're making the situation easier for the future years. If we don't take these the decisions now and make the savings now, the situation for next year and the year after are only going to be worse. So I stand by the proposals that were put through and agreed by Council in December. I say again, it's unusual that we're getting an identical motion 2 Council meetings in a row, especially when the timetable for deciding the budget was very clearly outlined all over the course of last year, and simply move the recommendations in the report.
Councillor Constable.
Thank you, Provost. In the face of this Westminster austerity programme, I think it's the only sensible thing, and I'm happy to second. Councillor Thompson.
Councillor Milligan.
Yeah, thank you. Owen, I think you're being rather disingenuous when you talk there about genuine offers. We came in here at the last meeting and we made a genuine offer. We didn't ask you to spend any more. What we asked you to do was to hold cuts to vital services, because at that stage you had well over £1.6 million of surplus for that financial year. That's grown by nearly £1 million now. By nearly another £1 million. So what we had said was true. Let's give it some time. We would come on board, we'd work and try and find out other places where we could save this, rather taking it for the voluntary groups, the most needed, for the taxi car scheme, and indeed the part that's not been added the following years, which is the CAT team, the Community Action Team, that's greatly valued. What we weren't asking for, so let's not kid on here, because the press are here, we're saying we're suddenly got to spend a lot more money. No, we weren't. What we were saying is these are areas that we weren't or wouldn't like to cut at this moment in time, and there were massive other areas there that any other opposition group that wanted to play politics could have just said, oh no, we're not agreeing with. We didn't. We picked the stuff that we thought was the most harmful to our communities and says that's what we want to save. We didn't ask you to scrap them even. What we says is, if you put them to the side, didn't take them at the moment, let's look and try and find other areas that we can get these for, and we offered to come on board. The offer's still open. It's been made with my colleagues there. However, it looks like you're sort of hell bent on making these cuts irrespective of what we offer.
Councillor Thompson.
You say Councillor Milligan says it's a genuine offer. I'd call it a conditional offer, and there's quite a significant difference there. It's I will take part, but only if you do this. If it's a genuine offer, I think once we get past the budget for this year, you would actually take part regardless, so that you can have that discussion over the course of the year. It's an open offer. It's not conditional on anything other than participation. I'm not saying you must accept this, that or the next thing, which is what the offer we're getting from Councillor Milligan is. I come back to the point again. I mean, regardless of when the savings have to be made, we have to achieve this. I think it's great. It's great news that we've managed to get the extra money from the Scottish Government. That's a bonus. It means that there's some cuts in future years we might not have to make. But the reality of it is, if you don't make the savings, you are spending more money. It's a simple fact. So the only proposal we've had from the Labour group is to spend more money. There's no hiding from that. And Provost, I come again. I think we know where we're all at on this. I'll reiterate the genuine offer to participate in Business Transformation Steering Group without condition, and also to actually take up the place on the Safer Communities Board, because we already see the interest that there exists within the Labour group for the issues that grouping is undertaking. So with that, Provost, I move the recommendations.
Right, we have the proposal from Councillor Muirhead, and I'm quite happy to accept the added on piece. Those in favour of that proposal, please show. Those against? Thank you.
Provost, are you taking that as are you taking that then as the
recommendations? As
the recommendations.
Yeah. Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Blair, for your time there. Item number 19 is a note for the seminar of Midlothian Council. Sorry, missed one. Oh, sorry. Yeah. I've got a date tonight. Item number 18, sorry. Midlothian Local Development Plan Draft Action Programme Consultation, report by Mr Johnson.
Thank you, Provost. At the Council's most recent meeting in December, members granted approval to the publication of the Midlothian Local Development Plan proposed plan, and also to the Draft Action Programme, which is a statutory accompanying document. The reason that the Action Programme was a draft document is because it is required to be the subject of consultation with relevant parties prior to its formal publication, along with the actual proposed development plan itself. Therefore, this report informs Council of the outcome of that consultation on the Draft Action Programme, which took place during December and January. And just to recap, the Action Programme collects together the list of policy and infrastructure requirements which are necessary to implement the development strategy of the plan itself. The aim is to provide some focus on these requirements by identifying the timescales for implementation of actions and those who would be responsible for undertaking the actions, and those are the parties with whom the consultation has taken place. Arising from that consultation, details of which are provided in the report, there are no, in my view, significantly substantive issues arising from it which would require changes to the local development plan itself. Essentially, the proposed changes to the action programme, which are set out as an appendix in this report, are to provide clarity and further information, which has been helpful, particularly from a number of the key agencies, and updates, corrections and amendments of a relatively modest nature, including such things as the programming of housing sites where prospective developers and Homes for Scotland will be able to provide more information, which has been helpful. There are a couple of issues which are raised in the text of the report, and clearly one of them is that there need to continue to be dialogue with Transport Scotland to ensure that we work carefully with them and others in looking at the strategic transport requirements arising from development proposals in the plan. Taking that together, the recommendation is as set out in the report that the identified changes to the action programme are approved, and that will then enable the proposed plan to be formally published along with this and the other accompanying documents. Happy to take any questions on any of that, Provost.
Thank you. Councillor Bryant.
Thanks very much for that, Ian. As Ian has said, that the amendments that we received are minor and modest amendments which are laid out in the appendix which anyone can read. So I have no hesitation, apart from speaking about the Transport Scotland that we are dealing with on a regular basis, and hopefully we'll get resolve on the questions there. The recommendation at 6.1, we approve the proposed amendments. Thank you.
Councillor Emery.
Yeah, thanks, Provost. Just to endorse what Councillor Bryant said, I mean, I had a conversation with the Senior Planning Officer, Neil Wallace, the other day. We went through the appendix, because there were a few things in there that, you know, could be interpreted as saying one thing and meaning the other, but you reassured me that there's nothing in there for us to be concerned about, and hopefully we can go forward with the amendments that are in text today, and indeed get on with getting this thing produced and getting it into the public domain, because it seems an inordinate amount of time that we've taken to go through things. I understand to do that, but you're just going to finish this one, and you'll then have to start on the next one. And it just seems, you know, as we start, you know, as we start this process again, you just begin to wonder, does it ever end? And I understand it's a changing landscape, and some of the comments are actually very positive in here, where there's a realism saying, well, we can't actually do completions in the way that you do it. Can we reconfigure? Absolutely sensible, and hopefully that will come into real planning applications. So just, you know, to endorse what the head of service has said, and indeed what Councillor Bryant said.
Thank you. Do you accept the recommendation? Thank you. Item number 19 is a note of the seminar of Midlothian Council. I'll be happy to accept the report. Thank you. Item number 20, the European System of Accounts, ESA Impact on the New Battle Project, report by Head of Property and Facilities Management.
Thanks, Provost. This report is really just a follow-up to the briefing that I sent out a couple of weeks ago to all elected members. The recent change to the ESA 10, as it's known, and the accounting rules that come with that, is having a direct consequence of delay on the New Battle project. All projects that follow the same pattern, the hub projects as we know them, are affected by this throughout Scotland, and we are unfortunately in the same pot as everybody else. The Scottish Futures Trust and the Scottish Government are working together. Scottish Futures Trust have been given the remit to come up with a set of conditions and changes to the contractual arrangements that are in place just now to effect the solution, and then that solution has to be agreed with all the participants and shareholders within all the hub development teams. That's going to take some time to agree. At this point in time, the Scottish Government and the Scottish Futures Trust do not anticipate that projects will be given the clearance to go ahead this financial year, which means it's going to be post-April until we can actually push the button to move ahead on the New Battle project. I had alluded to the fact that the Roslin and Paradise projects were also affected within the same guidelines, and that's a consequence of the investment from New Battle being moved over to the other two primary schools as previously set out to Council. The effect on that is not as severe insofar as we're at early stages of the project there, and the design phase will continue. It's when you get to the bigger spend of the construction phase that we fall into difficulties. And New Battle is obviously very close to that at this point in time and will be subject to a delay, unfortunately. This report sets out our position in terms of how we're dealing with SFT, Hubco, our own position internally in progressing the design and the negotiations with Hubco meantime. And Council's asked to note the delay that's been set out and receive update reports in due course from Director of Resources.
Councillor Rosie.
Yeah, thanks Gary for the update on what's happening, and it's noted that the Scottish Government are engaging with the UK Office for National Statistics on this, and they both will be lobbying on that one, and the Scottish Futures Trust are obviously working on it. So I'd just like to say that we, it's unfortunate that we're at this stage, but I just say that we note recommendation 5, and that we I know that we will be receiving updates from the Director of Resources in due course on where we're at with it to all members. Thank you.
Thanks, Provost. The timescales being, we'll know reach the financial position by in this financial year is kind of loose. I mean, have you got a better estimate or when we're talking about actually achieving that? I mean, what you've said kind of suggests, April. That isn't necessarily the case. And certainly I've had a number of contacts with constituents concerned that, in hearing that there is to be a delay because it's been a long time in coming and adding another delay to it is obviously problematic. So can you give us a better estimate, not just the impact this has got on the financial side, the start of the thing, but when it's actually, what effect it's got on the finish date of it as well, please?
Unfortunately, I can't give you any more clear understanding of the timescales when this will be resolved. The information that we've been getting is, as stated in the report, that it will not be this financial year. The best guess at this point in time is open to question. I hear it from various parties that it will be this month or that month, so it's a mess at the moment in terms of giving us a clear understanding of what those timescales will be. All I can say is that I do know that the work's going on in the background and there's optimism to see that to a conclusion, and we are continuing to lobby and to chivvy along to get a fast result so that we can get on with the construction work. In terms of the outcome, which is probably more important, the building has to be complete and then handed over for operational reasons through a holiday. So obviously on a school break you don't want to be mid-term and then transferring all the equipment and books and the likes. So we were looking at a Christmas finish. This delay is probably going to push that into, depending on when we get a resolution to it, into probably the worst time of year when it's exam time and an Easter break. So the preference would be to probably move that into the summer. Now that's not particularly palatable, but that's probably the reality. That would be 2017 summer.
Yeah, because I guess people aren't really interested in when the financial side of it gets set up here. It's the actual finish date that people are really bothered about, and it's unfortunately we're talking about a 6 month potential 6 month period here. And just given the kind of report backs we've had, it alarmed me when you talked about it has to be agreed with all shareholders in the hub development team. Given the problems that we've had before in getting things through the hub process, I start to have serious doubts about how long this is actually going to take, and I sincerely hope. I'm disappointed, to be perfectly frank. I thought you were going to say 3 months. I didn't expect it to be 6 months, and I'm still doubtful that even will be achieved, given the kind of problems that we've had with Hubco in the past.
The process that we have to go through is set out in the make-up of the company, and it's got to get all the participant agreement before we can actually go forward with it. I do know that all the participants, and that's all the local authorities, the NHS, the Blue Light Services, who are the participant bodies, SFT and Hubco make up the company that has to agree that. I do know that the discussion has been taken across all of those parties, and they're all pushing in the same direction to try and get this resolved. So the hope, and I say it as a hope, is that that will not take particularly long once they get to a position where the SFT have clarity on what will be accepted or not.
Councillor Young.
Thank you. So I kind of note from what you're saying that there's confidence that financial close is going to happen, and there's question marks over the timing of that. I also note from the report circulated today and previously that the pre-construction work at Paradise and Roslin is continuing. I guess my question is just a bit of a clarification. If we're confident we're going to get financial close, and if pre-construction work is happening at the other schools, what is the specific reason that construction work couldn't just begin at Newbattle pending financial close happening later?
We can get to financial close, but we can't spend the money. SFT, who have the purse strings, are putting 2/3 of the money into the project. Now, getting to financial close is getting to an agreement that we have a budget which is in line with where we were when we asked as a new project request way back a year and a half ago. That's fine. We can get to that stage and be ready to start. But the Scottish Futures Trust will not release the money to us to go forward with the project until this is resolved.
Provost, Mayor?
Okay.
Just on the basis that, just to completely clarify, we are certain that we're going to get financial close at some point, right? We are thinking that's going to happen. It was just to, you know, there must be work that's happening ongoing. So, for example, at the other two schools, there isn't any way that discussions can be raised about construction work beginning on the basis that they're going to get paid, or, for example, the elements of that which we are paying for. You know, could that cover the first few months, given that we don't expect it to be a long delay? I'm just double checking that all the avenues, you know, notwithstanding the detailed report and the effort that's going into getting it sorted, I'm just keen to know that all the avenues and the kind of, okay, maybe slightly creative thinking about keeping on track have definitely been chased down before we accept a delay. Thanks, Gary.
Whilst I'm saying that there is a feeling that this will be resolved, there's not an absolute certainty to it. There isn't. Until we actually get that statement from somebody within SFT or the government, we cannot say categorically this will be resolved. However, the feeling is that this will be resolved, and that's a feeling that's coming from everybody that's involved with the project. To spend the money at this point, as in commit the money from the Council's perspective, my colleagues in Finance will back this up. We could only commit our part of that. That would leave 2/3 of the money still outstanding, with no way to particularly get that back if it all fell apart. And I think that would be false to spend the money in the hope at this stage.
So just a final clarification. The reason that construction work hasn't begun is because, or cannot begin as originally planned, is because we're not certain that this project will go ahead and will get financial close. We don't have 100% certainty on that.
We don't have a date when that will be finished and completed in terms of the work that SFT are working with the government and the Office of National Statistics to get a conclusion to or a solution to how the European directive is interpreted and then used in our budgetary, whether it's on balance sheet or off balance sheet, essentially. Yeah.
Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, I think we do have to draw a distinction here. There's not construction work started at Paradise and Roslin. It's the early preparation work which has already happened at Newbattle. So I mean, Newbattle's at stage further down the line. So it's just the stuff that's happening and able to still continue to happen at Paradise and Roslin is the stuff that's already happened with Newbattle. So there is a distinction there. I've already had a number of discussions with people in the Scottish Government who are certainly pushing hard to get a resolution to this. The government wants to see an outcome to this as much as we do, and they're hopeful that they can have that outcome at the start of the financial year. But again, it's not a specific date. It's a hope of a particular point. The timetable for the outcome is not in the hands of the Scottish Government, and that's one of the issues here, that they're waiting for another body to come to that outcome. I've also written to John Swinney to highlight how important the project is to us, for the communities of Midlothian, and how keen we are to see this being able to move forward. It may be, and I mean I know Gary's won't be wanting to say this, but it may be that once we get to financial close, if financial close is close to the very start of the financial year, maybe there's some time that can be caught up. I think what's important is that, I know, and I see I'm looking, but Gary will never say that, I know that, but I would hope that some of the time might be able to get caught up. I think the important thing that we get here is that when we have a completed item at the end of the process, wherever that happens to be, that it's right. If that means that it's a summer 2017 opening as opposed to the end of 2016 over the Christmas, if it's the right project and it's the right outcome for those who are going to be using the facility, that's the most important thing to me. It's unfortunate, but I'll accept a delay if it means we get what we want at the end of the day. And to me, that's the most important thing.
Councillor Imrie.
Thank you, Provost. Just a few questions. What's the position of the contractors? And I asked that question against the background as there was a certain project that's been completed where it's, you know, the contractors were going to court, etc. on it. It's now the matter of a public inquiry. So I asked that question. That's the first question that I have. The second question is what's the role of SFT? And I'll give you a bit of background on that. ESA 10, meaning 2010, came into being there and then. Now, it's funny how your email happened to coincide with a meeting I had with the Cabinet Secretary for Infrastructure, who happened to mention about the delay with regard to certain projects. Unfortunately, because I'd read your email, Gary, and thank you very much for that, I didn't feel embarrassed in not knowing what was going on. But I asked the question against the background of SFT have 5 times taken external financial advice. Now, there's a plethora, and I say that word, plethora of accountants that work for SFT. I just wonder why they haven't managed to get this resolved. Now, I happen to remember a few years ago now, when I was on the SEPA main board, and on the audit, I was a member of the audit committee then, that we got not only KPMG, who were our internal auditors at that time, but also Audit Scotland, picked up on how you present accounts. Now, the accounting system that in fact has been adopted by Midlothian Council, because we had to under the European regulations, and Gary Fairley, and I see Gary Thompson nodding, but Gary Fairley has actually reported to this council a good few years ago, by the way, because it came in 2010. And all I'm asking is, what's SFT's role been in this? Why haven't they actually found out what they should have found out? And, you know, it's pretty evident to me, if you're sticking it in the wrong column, then you get found out. It's not that you're doing anything wrong, it's just that in accountancy terms, it's not in the right column. So I'd like to know then, how much money have SFT spent on external financial advice? And how ironic is it for SFT, and I think we've all seen it today, for their newsletter to come out just saying they're actually, here we go, cracking ahead with all these major projects. Now, I'm not just talking Midlothian, I'm talking pan-Scotland-wide, and I don't think any of us are saying anything against that, but SFT have been held up as the people that matter, the people that can deliver, and we've had our own problems within here. And I put that question to you because I just want to know, and if we can't get the answer today, I do think this council needs to get that kind of answer in details. It might be one you want to take away today. The third question I have is that Scottish Government are doing a carryover of £150 million, which is a kind of contingency fund, and UK Government have agreed to up the grant aid from the UK into the Scottish budget to be set aside in the event of. That's £450 million that's sitting there. Is there not an opportunity for us to have a call on some of that money to get, particularly Newbattle? Because I'm like the leader of the council on this. If Roslin and Paradise has to slip back a bit, then so be it, because it's not at such an advanced stage. But clearly Newbattle is, and is there not then an opportunity, or should we be making representation? I know the leader of the council said he's written to John Swinney, but in particular, should we look to get a drawdown on that kind of contingency money that's there, so we can get the programme started? And I asked that, not having a go at anybody, well, maybe I'm actually having a go at SFT, actually, because I just think we've been let down badly. And I don't actually believe that Audit Scotland, who actually sit there and audit everybody that walks along the street these days, I don't actually understand how they've not picked it up, because they've certainly picked it up with local authorities, they picked it up with Sestran, which is a public sector board, and they've picked it up with a government agency, which is SEPA. So I don't quite understand why all of a sudden, waking up and smell the coffee, we're in 2015, oh my goodness, we've been doing it all wrong. I know the ONS have actually, the Office of National Statistics, do have a role to play on this, but my goodness gracious, a little phone call by SFT to them to say, is what we're doing, is what we're producing right and correct? Yes or no? Might have gone a long way. And I'd just like to know what expenditure SFT have been expending and getting 5 financial advices, and in actual fact, by the looks of things, none of them been correct.
Well, I obviously can't respond to a lot of that in terms of SFT. What I do know their role in this particular part of the equation is that they've been given the remit to come up with the contractual solution. I know that they have put forward various versions of that, which at this point in time have not been accepted by the Office of National Statistics. I do know that they're continuing to work on that. In terms of your other part of the SFT part of that question, we'll have to come back and get that from another source. The set-aside money, we have made representation. We know about that money that's available. We have made representation, not just as a local authority, but as HUBCO, the board there, and we're in discussion as to whether that money can be released, not just to start projects, but more importantly to cover the first part of your question, and that is the contractors' on costs. We are in a rising market, and we are seeing tender prices going up. We have a baseline budget which was set some time back and then capped with inflationary adjustments at Q4 2014. And given that this is going to drag on to well into 2015, we've asked that those inflationary adjustments are increased and taken forward to allow for that inflation to come back to the participants using that set-aside money. That's where we stand on that.
Councillor Devink.
Well, I think Councillor Imrie actually raised something that is of great interest to all of us. I have not been a very great fan of SF, Scottish Financial Enterprise, and Scottish Financial Trust, SFT, Scottish Futures Trust. They have really, in the past, been responsible for a lot of very unfortunate financing. The PPP contracts were invented by them, and I think it would be interesting to hear what they have to say, because the ESA regulations have been well known for quite some time. It isn't as if that is something that really came about very recently. So could they just answer some of the questions that Councillor Imrie posed?
Another meeting.
Yeah.
Councillor Beattie.
Thank you, Provost. Could I ask Gary a question in abstract rather than tie you down on the issue of New Battle High? Because I'm sure, as the council leaders already observed, you'd be unwilling to speculate about this project. But given your professional background, in general terms, how realistic is it for a project of this scale to actually have catch-up opportunities in the course of the estimated time of build?
When you enter into a contract, you enter into a programme within that contract which is everybody's best intentions. You can accelerate works, but you have to throw money at that. That's into evening working, weekend working and all the rest of it. I don't think that that's necessarily the question that we have to consider. The consideration is, when do we want it to open? Now, if we get the project finished in, let's say, April, does that suit us to take possession at that point when it's bang in the middle of exams? And I quite suspect the answer to that from an educational point of view is no, we don't. The best time to take it is the start of June, because then you get the time to lead in and transfer all the equipment and books and all the rest of it that goes with a school. And as we saw at last Wade, we had an operational opening and then we had the educational opening, and that worked particularly well. It allowed people to get familiar with the building before they actually open to the public and the likes. So accelerating the programme where it may be possible, may not be possible, does it actually service our needs? We've got to think about the opening date and whether that is an achievable date and one that we can actually put hand on heart and say, that's when we want it.
Okay. My colleagues, I will put my builder's hat on, and I would would rather, it's unfortunate this delay has taken place, but would rather delay the finish date than rush through a building that's going to be occupied by children. In Midlothian, we've had the experience of buildings being rushed, and, well, it could have been disastrous consequences. But anyway, thank you for attendance today, and safe journey home.